We're going to get started now. Everyone using the headsets, can you hear okay? If not, be sure to adjust your volume. There are different volume settings to make sure you can hear okay. All right. Hello, my name is Barbara Ray Holcomb, Barbara Ray, and I am the person hosting this ASL lecture series today, and this will be the final ASL lecture series for this academic year, so I hope you really enjoy it. We've invited a wonderful speaker by the name of Guy Wonder, and he was actually one of our very first students to attend NTID in 1968 when it was opened, and the whole place was a giant fishbowl. The whole of the world had its eyes on NTID to watch and see what kind of a success it would be. So his major was within the school of was in the American Craftsman School, and he majored in textiles. And he also was the first drama club president for the school here. So this is going back quite a few years now. He's got a long history with NTID, and it's very nice that he could come here. He hasn't been here in the past 25 years, and he's really amazed by all the changes and the grand expansion that we've had here. Now, when he finished his studies here at NTID, he went to work in New York City at Bloomingdale's as a window dresser. And he was responsible for setting up all the various window displays, if they had bedding or what have you. He did a lot of interior design work for them. And he will be showing you some of his work as well. When he was done with his time in New York, he went to San Francisco, and he'll be explaining about the work that happens there. And he works a lot in mixed media, and he will explain more about what that means, so I'm not going to go on about it now. But right now, I'd like to welcome Guy Wonder to the stage. Guy, would you come forward?
Thank you, thank you. Okay, let me see if I can turn off the projection. The DVD, I'm sure, would be a distraction while I'm signing. Just let me introduce myself. I grew up in Washington State. I'm a third-generation deaf person from a deaf family. My family also has artists in their heritage. My deaf grandmother was an artist, just as I am. I wasn't able to meet my grandmother while she was alive. She died before I was born. I'd like to talk a little about mixed media. I will explain more about it as I show some of the examples of artwork. And I'd also like to talk about Devia and how that has influenced mixed media, and mixed media has influenced my work with Devia. I work mostly with wire and paper, wood, and textile, and I use that to make 3D effects in order to use the sign language and the deaf experience and to create movement in my artwork. And so as you look at the art that I produce, you can see the actual form of the art coming close to you or further in a distance. I did come here and study at NTID, and I studied textile design and weaving in the craftsman major at that time. And when I was a student, I really didn't understand what exactly the major meant. And I found out that it was more with fiber and textiles and fashion design. And that's what I thought it would be, actually. And when I came here, I found out it was really more weaving, using the looms, as you would imagine an old-fashioned weaving textile mill. And it really did not meet my expectations. But I felt that I wanted to work in the art field rather than working on a loom my entire life. I decided to continue in that degree, complete my degree, and then continue on to New York City and learn the design aspects of my work in New York City. I've also worked in museums down in New York City, and I'll talk about that a little later. Now, I got here in the summer of '68, and I was able to visit New York City. I lived near Greenwich Village when I was down in the city, and there was a bar called the Stonewall Bar, and that place, well, it just happened to be on my birthday that I went to that bar. And it was a dance club as well. And I had gotten there, and they had this big police raid at that time because the gay and lesbians were congregating there, and the police had come in and raided it and closed it down. And all of the gay and lesbian people in the community at that time got very upset, and they started to protest as a result of the police raid, and more people participated. And my artwork was influenced by that entire event because people decided to come out at that time, and I did at the same time. And because of that experience, I incorporated that experience into my artwork, and that continued for several years after the protests of that time. Let me give you an example of one of my pieces of art. Oh, this is very clear. This is great. This looks kind of like a lot of etch work and broken glass. It's kind of like shards going out in every direction, and it's expanding. And that has to do with going out and feeling good about yourself, being free and expanding. It's more geometric in its design. And it's kind of a collage also, as I've built one piece of media on top of another. When I worked at Bloomingdale's as a window dresser, I also might have worked with clients as well, doing some design work for their homes. And so I had 2 jobs at that time. Here is an example of one of the displays. It's highlighting bedroom furniture, and it also has the ornamentation that you would find in a bedroom to make it a complete package. Here's another example of some of my work. I remember when NTID established the theater department here, Bob Panera talked with me about the fact that NTID was considering setting up a club. And there were 60 deaf students in the time. 40 of them were oral, and 20 were signing deaf students. So that was the split at that time. And I didn't feel comfortable with the people who were oral. I felt that I couldn't talk with them very well, and it was hard to communicate. And I said, drama really isn't going to be successful here because we're going to need to have interpreters, and really should be deaf run. And Bob Panera and I talked about it, and he agreed. And we talked to Dr. Castle, and Dr. Castle said, go ahead and set it up the way you think it should be set up. And really, this is what we've established, and we can thank Bob Panera for this theater and thank Dr. Castle for all of the theater that happened here at NTID. And let me tell you, at that time, the people who were oral participated in the drama club, and they picked up sign language and became very fluent and proficient signers. In summer school, or the summertime, I went to the National Theater of the Deaf, and I met an actor there. We became very close friends. And Mary Beth Miller was an artist at that time, and she was author of this book called Hand Talk. You can see her signing Rainbow with the colors on her fingers. And she did a lot of work with an artist. They would cut out shapes. And Mary Beth was talking to me about incorporating deafness into my work. And I said, well, I really have a lot of influence with the gay and lesbian community in my work. And the only thing I might have incorporated might have been the I love you hand shape, and that was just about it. Let me see, I think I've got an example of the... now this the I love you handshake that you'll see is her exact hand in this picture. Jim and Liz O'Brien are in this picture, and both of them are retired now. I met, this was in 1975, and you can see the I love you in the center of the shirt, in the center of the design. As I interacted with other deaf friends, not just Mary Beth Miller, but other deaf friends that I had met in the summer, we talked about the deaf experience. And, Mary Beth said, why don't you come and join us in Spectrum? There's going to be this group in Texas. And Chuck Baird was another person who was also involved in that summer workshop. And via some correspondence, I found out who was involved and found out that it was really more about serious deaf issues. And that experience inspired me in New York City. At that time, King Tut was on exhibit. His exhibit had arrived in America, and it was on exhibit in the museum, and it was just really beautiful artwork. I went to see that museum, and I had set up, planned a party in which it had an Egyptian theme. And I'm going to show you a clip from my DVD that talks about that experience. Let me find it on this list. Yeah, I had a party with an Egyptian theme at my loft in New York City. It was upstairs, and I had painted a large mural on the wall, and it had a lineup of different figures and columns at either end of the mural. Each of the statued figures had different shades of coloring and pigment for their skin. Some had headdresses on, Egyptian headdresses, very intricate in detail. There were some that were bald, some that had Egyptian ornamentation. Each of them had their own unique ornamentation. As a deaf person, I feel that eye contact is very important, and so the eyes were very detailed, and each of the statues and figures in this mural, I paid a lot of attention to the cosmetics, the cosmetic ornamentation as well, such as necklaces, bracelets, belts. And I used paint and mixed media in that mural as well. And for example, where deaf people tend to get each other's attention at the shoulder or at the hip, there might be a more prominent display on those areas of the body. So it was quite representative of deaf culture in an Egyptian mural format with the Egyptian style. So I used that tradition of the Egyptian theme, and I included my deaf experience to fit what I felt looked wonderful as a mural for this party. And as I was finished with the mural, I was just about done, and I was looking at my work and looking at each of the figures, and one of my friends who was deaf was over, and I said, there's this one particular figure that just, the bald guy who's standing there, there's something that's not quite right about him. The other figures looked good, but this one guy just did not look right. And he agreed with me. He said, yes, something's missing, but I really don't know what it is either. And we looked and we looked. We said the detail of the eyes look good. The proportions of the bodies look good. He was looking at another person. That other person was looking back. And we couldn't figure out what the problem was, and the party was that evening, but there was just something wrong with it, something that needed to be fixed. It was obvious, but yet unobvious. We couldn't figure it out. At that time, a friend came over to visit, a person who wasn't deaf. He was a hearing actor, and he came in and, I said, "Hey, why don't you come and see what I have done for the party tonight?" And he looked at the mural I had painted and he said, "Oh, it's beautiful, but that one bald guy." And we said, "Yeah, what's wrong with him?" He said, "Well, he doesn't have any ears." And we both looked at my other deaf friend and I looked at each other and we said, "That's right, he doesn't have any ears. He was just a head without any ears." And I thanked my friend who was hearing. I mean, he saved the day, and I went to draw in the ears, but it was really difficult. It was really difficult for me to get the ears in correct proportion in the right part of the face so that it would fit in with the rest of the mural. And as I looked at all of the Egyptians, all that I had drawn, all of them had ears, and some had the headdresses, but they had ear holes, and there was some type of a representation that you would know that the ears were there, but I don't really pay much attention to the ears as a deaf person. The eyes are what really draw me to an image, a painting, and that's what I gave my attention to. Now, getting back to Spectrum, Betty Miller and Mary Beth came to my party. They were at this Egyptian party, and they saw the mural. And we were talking about incorporating the deaf experience, Devia celebration. Now, Devia was not established yet. The idea was just to talk about the deaf experience in art. Now, later during the Deaf President Now movement, that was quite an inspiring movement for me personally as an artist, because there was a strong expression of deafness. Now, in the early days of my artwork, I had, again, as I mentioned already, been inspired by gay and lesbian themes in my art. But as AIDS became more prevalent and my friends started to die, I lost some motivation including that in my artwork. And as some of the art was offered at auction, I decided that I was kind of finished with that chapter of my life and I wanted to get into more home design. But then the Deaf President Now movement became prevalent, and I thought I should add more of the deaf experience in my artwork. So I can consider this the second period of my life. The first period of my life was the gay and lesbian influenced artwork, and the second period is the deaf influenced artwork. I went and participated in the Deaf President Now, and I met with Betty for several days, and we talked about it, and we decided to set up Devia, and sharing our experience through images and artwork. I offered a sculpture of mine for the Deaf Way, which was in 1989. It was honoring the Deaf President Now movement, and I was kind of, I did a piece of artwork for the Deaf President Now, but I didn't want to offer that for Deaf Way. I wanted to do a new piece for Deaf Way, which I'll show you now. This was a large sculpture, it was about 8 feet tall, and it was a sculpture that could be folded. It was a powerful piece. It was a pyramid in shape. And as the wind blew, it could move. And so it wouldn't fall over, but it could move and rotate. It was made of wood with paper and metal and wire. Again, mixed media. And it wasn't a permanent sculpture, but this is what the sculpture looked like that I have done for Deaf Way. The bottom picture on the left, you can see the hands spreading out, and on the bottom, the hand shapes are there, but it's negative space, so you're looking through the hands. On the top, you're seeing the positive space. You're seeing the arms with the hands and the fingers. People who start learning sign language can't sign, and so they're very awkward, kind of invisible, until they do understand sign language and become more fluent in the deaf experience. So in the beginning, they have no sign looking through the hands, and as they become fluent, it's like coming out in the gay and lesbian community. You come out, you're a signer, and you explode, and you can see your signs in the positive space. Now this picture on the right-hand side is like a window with the hands blocking. People are trying to see through and they can't get through. Let me see if I can show you another picture. Here on the right-hand side is the pyramid shape of the hands kind of blocking the way until you can get through and take off in your experience with sign language. So I did a polished mirror, and then we put some paint on it, and I put some greens and some purples and different colors all over the piece. You can't see it from a distance, but it's in between the fingers. And as you walked up closer to the piece, you could see the different colors. And so I made this piece, and I asked my student, what color do you think we should have? And maybe we should put colors on the face of the hands or on the palms. And I let the students decide what colors to make and let the student feel a part of this work. And the student decided to put the color in between the fingers, just on the lines of the fingers, not on the back of the hand or the palm, but just in between. After Deaf Way and the Deaf President Now movement, I was inspired to include deafness in my work, and I was asked to travel and give lectures. Now, AIDS was big at that time, and I went to Maryland for 1 week. There were artists getting together, and there were people sitting across from one another, looking at one another, and we were talking about our experience, our life experience, preferences about color, preferences about hobby. Do you like to party or not? And we exchanged those ideas. And let me give you a sample of what it looks like. Okay, this is a collage.
So as you can see, uh-oh. If you could come forward, Barbara, and help me out here. Here we go. You can see how I've got the different layers put together, and it's very interesting. As you look out, you can see, people are wise and smart. You can see, yet at the same time, they're very proper. You can see sort of different halves of people, and that's what I'm trying to display in this work. During the Deaf President Now, also during, there was a president can be wise, a president can, it has a lot of different sides. There's a lot of different elements that they must have. And so again, we're talking about the civil disobedience and people, the two halves of the same person coming together, but showing them more independently in the work. Now, this was a boy I was sitting across from, and he was very flashy and seemed to have a lot going on with him. And he had purple clothes. And so again, I've got things sort of cut up and very graphically displayed in the abstract. But I wanted to, again, show all the different parts and the different characteristics of a person coming forward in the work. Now this piece, I'm sorry, let me turn it right side up for you. This piece is another from the DVD. I talk about this piece in the DVD. My grandfather was deaf. He died in 1996. And as I was cleaning out his belongings and everything, I had come across some various things that he had, and there were just some things that were left. I collected up all of the different papers that he had just collected over the years, stuffed into a drawer without thought. And he had basically lived in the same house for many years, and things had collected, and I went in and found them. And it was really a treasure trove of deaf history. There were a lot of things that he had saved, different papers, different things that he had kept copies of and filed. I wanted to preserve all of these things. I didn't want to use the actual artifacts for my artwork, so I made photocopies, and I've used them in various and sundry artworks that I have done over the years. And my grandfather had very big, he was a big, full hands. He had very large hands, and he was a teacher, and I represented my hand as the wire,